Let's turn to this now. One of the hot topics at this year's BRICS summit has been using local currencies for trade between member states. Moscow and Beijing are already conducting transactions using the Russian ruble, for example, and the Chinese yuan. But questions have been raised about China's influence on the bloc, given the size of the country's economy. University of Johannesburg Center for Africa-China Studies Research Fellow Dr. Sizo Nkala joins us now for more. Dr. Sizo, good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening. Paint a picture for us. Is the BRICS picture that you see and that you know representative of a convergence club? Or a one-nation dominance because, I suppose, of the size of its respective contribution to the entire GDP of the bloc?
Well, good evening, and thank you for having me. I think at the moment, BRICS represents an awkward arrangement because you have in the group countries like China and India, who really don't have the same vision or who don't share a common vision for BRICS going forward. I think for China and maybe Russia, BRICS, they want to mold BRICS as a platform for anti-West rhetoric because of the relations, the strained relations that they have with the West, particularly the United States. I mean, for China, it's the trade war with the United States, and for Russia, it's the sanctions that were imposed by the United States and its Western allies. Then with India and South Africa, maybe Brazil as well, they seem to want to take a cautionary approach to the question of the West. They don't really want BRICS to be an anti-West platform, but they, I think, want to find ways of working with the West, like practical and pragmatic ways of working with the West. So I think there's a lack of a common vision as to where BRICS should go.
Yeah, and how does that lack of cohesion, for example, impact on policy coordination to be able to increase the group's collective power and influence on the global stage?
Yeah, I think it has a huge impact. If you look at the question of expansion, for instance, China and Russia, I think they would like to accelerate and push forward this expansion agenda. Because I think they want to increase their influence. They want to expand their influence across the global south. India, on the other hand, I think it sees expansion as undermining its influence within BRICS. So it takes I think a slow and a more reserved approach on the expansion of the group. So that's why you will see maybe this summit won't really pronounce or admit new members. What will be debated in this coming summit is the criteria for admitting new members, not really admitting new members. So I think these are some of the differences between the BRICS member states.
Who are the real threats to India? I mean, India has, by and large, been catching up, at least in the last decade, as far as their respective share of the GDP in the BRICS bloc.
Yeah, it's been catching up, but it still lags very much behind China. And if you can remember, a few years ago, India and China had a border scuffle that resulted in deaths of Indian and Chinese soldiers. And their politics, the geopolitics in the Indo-Pacific, in the Indian and Pacific Oceans between India and China, is becoming increasingly antagonistic. You have India joining the quadrilateral security dialogue. With Australia, Japan, and the US. That is designed to contain Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean. So I think there's some strain and tension between India and China at the moment, and then that affects the way they work together in the BRICS platform.
Yeah. And let's talk a little bit more about that. I mean, I'm hearing in some quarters, for example, that South Africa, in fact, I heard earlier on in some reportage that South Africa, for example, would back the inclusion of a country like Egypt, while India, if they were to back a country, probably they would back a country like the UAE to come on board and be part of the blocs. Are these a direct threat in terms of size of GDP to any of the countries that are already in the bloc, to an extent that they would, I suppose, dilute or even reduce their influence?
Well, I think the countries must be careful in choosing which countries, which new members they want to admit. Obviously, I think the different members of BRICS would have different preferences. I mean, South Africa would prefer an African country because admitting an African country as a new member will enable South Africa to push the African agenda within BRICS. And in India, obviously, will prefer countries that it can control, that it works well with, to enhance its influence and to be able to push its own strategic interests within BRICS. So I think when it comes to this question of specific countries that are supposed to join BRICS, I think that's where the debate will be. So we don't know for now who will carry the day.
What is the obstacle to establishing a common currency, do you think?
Well, I think the major obstacle for now is the lack of a common or a functional international financial system or a financial infrastructure, because the countries at the moment are still reliant on an infrastructure, a financial infrastructure that was built by the West and the US. So I think they have to build a new financial system amongst themselves, and also build trust amongst themselves. And also another obstacle, I think, is the level of production and the level of complementarity between the BRICS countries themselves and the broader global south. I'm not sure if they're producing enough yet to support an international reserve currency.
Yeah. So BRICS GDP expected by 2028 to surpass that of the Group 7 countries to 33.6%. G7 now sitting at 27%. China is the one really pushing hard for that for BRICS to be a replacement of the G7. Is China's supremacy within the group an insurmountable problem?
Well, it will become an issue depending on how China throws around its weight in the group. So far, I think China has restrained itself in terms of coercing or forcing other partners to take its positions. But at some point, I think China will use its economic weight, like its significant economic war chest, to influence the positions that have been taken by BRICS. But at the same time, the other BRICS partners do have leverage. China cannot work it alone, especially as it is engaging in the the trade war with the US, and then the West is speaking of de-risking and decoupling, which basically means reducing their cooperation, reducing their trade relations and investment relations with China. So China needs BRICS partners. I think BRICS as a group must find an optimal way for working together to achieve a common interest.
Dr. Sizo Nkala, appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming on tonight here on In Focus and that analysis.